Hi everyone, welcome to today's session of Women's Majlis. Today's session is going to be with Butheina Kazim. For those who don't know, Butheina Kazim is the founder of Cinema Akil. She has worked previously as a project manager in television and radio stations in the UAE at media conglomerates, Arab Media Group, and Dubai Media Incorporated. She is the producer of a short documentary called Letters to Palestine, and it was the winner of Special Jury Prize at the Abu Dhabi Film Festival in 2010. Butheina was also selected in Screen International's Future Leaders in 2019, and it was launched at the Cannes Film Festival. She won several awards. One of them was the Grazia Award for Arts and Culture and the Emirates Women Award for Arts and Culture as well in 2019. Butheina, aside from the ones that I mentioned, would you like to tell us more about yourself, whether it was your background, where you grew up, and your studies?
Hi, Mariam. Hi, everybody. It's lovely to see a lot of familiar names on the session today, and it's nice to see you again, even though from a distance. I had the pleasure of working with you in one of the most critical phases of building the cinema and opening it a couple of years ago. So it's nice to be catapulted into the future here to this conversation. I mean, we were talking about sort of the story and the inspiration behind Cinema Akil before we got on the session, and perhaps I can share with you some of the thinking behind it, and what got us to finally do this and spend the past 5 years working on this. Let me just share with you my screen. I usually, outsource my thoughts to the big screen and to works of directors and masterpieces, and I always like to relegate that to the moving image and visual cues. So you can't have a cinema and be in that industry and just spend your time talking head. So this is my little kind of journey throughout the cinema. For those of you who have seen it, obviously this looks like a familiar sight to you, but it's been a long road to get there. And this is where we are right now. I mean, this is where it all started. This is what everybody knows Dubai to be, and this is the kind of the common, first top of mind image of what the city is. But behind that city, is a city that I call home. Is a city where I grew up. Is a city that is real. That's filled with stories. That's filled with a lot of unique, I think problems and beauty and richness that I feel is sometimes flattened, through this. And I wanted to create a space ultimately that reflects that richness. So that's kind of the existential backdrop. These are the images that you see, circulated, that we get clickbaited for. This is the sort of the Dubai story. We have, penguins in malls, and we have all these things, which are true. I mean, these are things that are there. And it's part of the story, but it's not the full story. This is, and I mean, it's interesting that we're talking about this through the framework of, how to imagine the future. And, this is a binary that we always find ourselves, talking about Dubai through, the past and the future. And, you look at a structure like the frame, it, builds on that, and a lot of books and, exhibitions and thought leaders always use this framing of Dubai. And I think in between this, there's been a lot of human experience, and part of that human experience starts in, the cinema. And these are the cinemas that I grew up with here. Right now, I think there isn't a single one of them that is standing, unfortunately. But this is where the communal experience of cinema going, where where people came together to watch cinematic works happened in Dubai, and we saw that disappearing into the future, into that binary that looks like this, So now the cinema going experience. Well, now we're at a very unique juncture, and we can talk a little bit more about that later, But ultimately, that idea of communal experience, of gathering, of bringing people together, of sharing stories, disappeared into a lot of gimmickry. And a lot of the thinking around this came again from the unique place that we occupy. We're surrounded by some of the richest regions and people and histories, of the world. And yet, we don't find that reflected. These are the kinds of people that, we go to work with every day. We fall in love with. These are the people that we, break bread with. This is the texture of this city, and this is the texture of United Arab Emirates and the surrounding region. Yet all we see on the big screen, in cinemas, like what I showed you, are images that look like this. They're caught in those binaries. They're exaggerated. They're, stereotypes often. They're negative portrayals. They're regurgitations, and have a very particular take on this region. And we wanted to put together something and present something that is part of the everyday kind of engagement and the story building and the identity creation of the city that challenges that. So ultimately, this is what we're doing. We're taking a bet on Arab vulnerability. We're taking a bet on regional vulnerability through the beauty of cinema, and creating a space where those films are being shown. So yeah, to make a long story short, it came from this desire to challenge the status quo. I'm just gonna quickly cut through that, but yeah, I mean that's sort of the thinking behind what inspired the idea of Cinema Akil, what inspired the urgency behind it.
Okay, great. So it was a passion that you had growing up, and it wasn't just a path that you followed. So and it shows in your studies before you founded Cinema Akil, and that this encouraged you to do so. But what are some of the challenges that you've had with Cinema Akil before you started it?
Look, I mean, going back to how I ended up here, beyond the thinking. So this is the sort of the idea, but the actual kind of path has always been just about, finding a way to challenge representation, right? So, and my career took me through a lot of different, sort of stages of that. I came back from my undergrad studies, in Toronto, thinking that I was into a Dubai that was growing, where everything was possible. It was the golden era. It was right before the financial crisis, and and I started working with the Arab Media Group on a project that essentially was trying to do what we're doing now with Cinema Akil, but on free-to-air television, to 360 million people. So it was kind of the reverse, almost presentation of what we're trying to do, guided by the same idea, guided by the same principles of betting on cinema, of betting on, audiovisual representation and work from the region, but in a very different scale, with productions and the medium of free-to-air television, which has now, completely changed. So, there's always been that need. And, when that didn't happen, due to the financial crisis and the challenges that came, with that, I found other pockets that allowed me to do this. And a lot of those pockets, whether it was productions that I was working on, from behind the camera, whether it was, Letters to Palestine as an example, whether it was, even editorial work that I was doing, it was always guided by this idea of how to challenge and how to push back and how to kind of, create a new story and a new way of looking, and also having the shared idea of, of community around it. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of, and I started to independently, program. I started to take those films that we were acquiring for television, and I think kind of, decided to take it upon myself to, organize screenings, at different venues all over the city. This is before Cinema Akil was even on the table. This was before the idea of an art house even came to fruition. It was just this kind of, urgency and this need to make sure that people, and people on ground, had access to this content. And we did have the Dubai Film Festival at the time, and that was great. But it was 10 days out of the year where these films were being shown. So yeah, there was always this frustration that I was trying to solve for essentially throughout my career, and it took different turns. Yeah, and then I ended up taking an academic route after that for a while to kind of really think through the ideas of what I was trying to do, what I was trying to challenge. I did a Master's of Arts in Media, Culture, and Communication that kind of brought all these disciplines together as well. And then that was right before I started, putting it into practice, through the avenue of Cinema Akil.
Nice. I remember from like a visitor's view, I used to attend the open cinemas before Cinema Akil was a thing, when it was outdoor cinema. And I loved the concept because you don't find that a lot. Like the only other thing you can find, which is an open cinema, was in Sharjah at the time, which the Sharjah Art Foundation that did that. And then I was very lucky to be interning for you at the first launch of Cinema Akil. And we went through everything, and it was interesting to see how everything came together. And then 1 year later, seeing Cinema Akil where it is now is amazing. So do you mind explaining to everyone what were the stages of Cinema Akil for those who did not attend it from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, it's been quite a journey. We started in July 2014. With the same idea. So I was doing it in my personal capacity before I took a break and started and went to pursue my grad studies. I decided to kind of create an institution. But before that, it was a lot of iteration. It was a lot of transitioning from me independently working with, for example, the Abu Dhabi Film Festival to bring an edition of the Abu Dhabi Film Festival to Dubai, to actually creating an umbrella for it. And it all started in Al Quoz, as a pop-up cinema in a gallery back in 2014. That was the first Cinema Akil screening. And then it took several years until we got to working together, which was a year and a half ago now. Well, 2 years now, because it was in the summer where we tested the idea of actually building a brick and mortar project, and then finally opening the space. So we started off as a nomadic cinema, which is kind of true to the nature of the city, and it was some of the richest experiences that we gained over the years. The idea was that we would travel from venue to venue. We'd look at every possible event as a place for a communal experience of cinema. Some of them were indoor, some of them were outdoor, some of them were huge, some of them were 5-person installations. And that was a lot of experimentation. And then there was the beta version that you worked on. And then finally opening the space, the brick and mortar, in September 2018. So I'll just take you through some of those images. I mean, this is something we still do. So this is the yard. If anybody's been to the outdoor, the one that you're speaking about, this is what some of our most, ongoing and richest programming that we do, because it is in Al Sarkal Avenue, our partner in this whole journey. And we program both spaces. So we program our indoor space, and this is public facing outdoor programming that will make a comeback during the outdoor season. But yeah, this is our earliest one. So this is the one I was talking about in 2014. We didn't have a logo. All we had was a name, and it was in the Third Line Gallery, which is now our neighbor in Al Sarkal Avenue. But back then they were right across the street, and we actually have a view of this very gallery, from the window inside the cinema to the original space. It's right now it's a belly dancing studio. So it has completely changed the mission. But the Third Line moved, and here we are. So it took us about 4 years of doing different pop-ups. We did, I think it was over 70 actually pop-ups. And when I say pop-up, it could be a series of of 10 10 screenings to a single screening. We developed our community, and this is really where we gathered a lot of the learning, and challenged a lot of our ideas of what an art house is, because it wasn't like we were interested in opening something that existed elsewhere. It wasn't, I was, yes, I would spend a lot of time in art houses, when I lived, in North America, for example, and I would go and frequent, art houses wherever I would go. It was something that I was personally curious about, but it wasn't something I was interested in parachuting into the city. It wasn't about replicating an experience. It was about kind of creating something that was responsive. So this is where we learned a lot of that. And these are some of them. You've been to some of those big and small ones. This is the one in Seoul.
Yeah, the one in Sarkal I've been to.
Yeah, that one is still carry. We still do that. This is Seoul DXP, the event that usually happens in December. This is in Sikka Art Fair in the Fahidi Historical District. And these are some other ones. We also went to Abu Dhabi and do programming at Warehouse 421, Al Imarat Park, Sharjah Art Foundation, one of my favorite venues, and they're absolutely the pioneers in kind of bringing back community public screenings. This is Sarkal, and yeah, these are just some of them. I'm not gonna go into another. There's a lot of videos, but yeah, I would just. You were saying something specific about your experience.
Oh yeah, the thing that made Cinema Akil very special is the design, which I would like to tap into that in a bit, because it was different than other places. It's a place you go to and you feel like you're at someone's house, like in their living room, watching a movie with them, because the colors were different. And even the small things that all of us who were contributing at that time, whether we were like volunteers, interns, or people who did the design, like I remember driving with my friend all the way to Ajman and to get pillows just so we can put them on the couches. And I brought my old TV and I had it outside, like when people walk in. And it was just like something you connect to. And I felt that also with other people that were coming with me and seeing the movie there. It's just a different feeling. So I would like you to talk more about the cinema design, like what inspired you, and then the selection process, because the movies are different and a lot of people don't know what kind of movies are being played there, or what is the selection process.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the space for those of you who haven't been to it. I mean, this is the space that we built before we opened the final home to Cinema Akil. So the original idea was completely different, and the warehouse was completely different. And we looked at a lot of different possible locations for this, and ultimately decided, in order for us to really understand what the space is going to be, we have to test the theory out. We have to make sure that we are able to stress test, the concept of a brick and mortar, home for cinema, and not only home for cinema, home for exactly what you were talking about. This idea of people coming together, frequenting it to kind of, to really use it as a station. And if you remember, I mean, it was in the heat of summer 2017. It ran from July to September. Some of the hottest months of the year. And still, and it wasn't, we had no signage outside. And, this was a partnership with Sarkal Avenue that allowed us to take over the space, but we weren't able to build a single or drill a single nail into the wall. So everything that we built was kind of, was put together in a lot of different workarounds. And it was a result of a community effort. It was a result of believing in building a space like this and wanting to see it happen. And ultimately, this is the Cinema Akil story. It's not because we built a cool looking space. It's not because we have amazing chai, partners. It's not only because the programming is incredibly important and rich, but it's because there are people that are betting on it. And this is what, that I always go back to, thinking about the cinema right now, in this kind of challenging time, is what will catapult us into the future, and will carry us through those difficult times. Is this betting on against all odds, on community and on building something together and fighting for it, essentially. So this is the what some of that journey looked like. I mean, some of it might look familiar to you. You were behind the scenes in a lot of it. So yeah, that was the temporary, that was the guiding light, essentially. This experience of building it with all you guys, with all the volunteers, and everybody that worked on this project, essentially, gave us the seed, the real kind of, I think the rooting of what we were going to stand for, what kind of programming we were going to offer, what people were looking for. It was the everyday, insistence of audiences to come and watch, a film like that we opened with, for example, a film like I Am Not Your Negro, which is now, available online. And I think it's an incredible film and everybody needs to watch it. And it's on our Instagram page. We shared a link for everybody to access the film. But back then, it was obviously, incredibly important then, but it was not attached to to a political moment or a disruptive moment. And yet, the curiosity around, that conversation, that kind of criticality is essentially what became the guiding kind of pillar, for the program. And we took over this very space and then transitioned into a full-time space, as opposed to the other way around and building something, completely from scratch. So yeah, this is what it looked like. And as you can see, I mean, a lot of it was designed for people to hang out. A lot of people, told us through this, we had bigger ideas. We had, a lot more design centric, I think, thoughts as to what the space should look like. And it was because of people's kind of insistence and feedback, and asking us, to not change anything if we were to reopen, to keep it the way it is, hearing what people liked about it, sitting close to each other. We made decisions like, keeping, the getting rid of the assigned seating, for example, making the cinema open, all day for people to just come and use it as an open space, keeping a lot of the texture, keeping some of the ruggedness. The kind of F&B partner that we ended up working with, expanded through the space. So a lot of these, small kind of in transit, we obviously upgraded a lot of the things, but ultimately it was based on a bedrock of very, very rigorous kind of exchange. Here it is. Yeah. So that's what led us to the final sort of station, or where we are. And I don't know if you want to, I mean, this is a lot of just, sort of the institutional kind of modeling behind it, and, and the business, the idea, the business model of an art house, and thinking around, what models we referred to. Again, going back to this idea of not wanting to, to parachute something or import something into the community. So we looked at a lot of models. We didn't just look at, established sort of, there are sort of multi-cinema art house chains now, all over the world. In the UK, for example, is one of the biggest ones is, Picture House, MK2, and so on. But we really looked at, models and the common denominators that brought together the idea of an art house, throughout the world. And it is some of the fundamentals that we built everything on. We're a proud member of the network of Arab art house screens, a network of cinemas around the region that are dedicated to the kind of programming that, that is socially conscious, that is challenging, that is experimental. And this was kind of the landscape that we operated in. Obviously, a lot of these are gone now. So we're operating in a very different landscape. And finally, the actual location, of selecting a place like Al Serkal Avenue, for those of you who are familiar with it, that shared these principles, that shared this vision for, for creating an alternative experience of how to exist in the city. And, after a long, drawn out process, we landed this is Cinema Akil.
Amazing. There's one thing about the Arab cinema. How is Cinema Akil supporting the Arab cinema?
I mean, we don't like to use the word support because they support us, we support them. It's an ecosystem. It's something that is fundamental to our mission. Not only as a cinema, that's a member of the network of Arab art house screens. Not only a cinema that is here in the region, but it's ultimately a direct kind of response to a huge gaping hole that we recognized in the cinema offering. It was something that I mentioned, the Dubai Film Festival, which used to be around at the time, and the Abu Dhabi Film Festival, which are both gone right now. It was extremely frustrating to not be able to to experience some of the most important cinema works that are coming out of the region, unless you go to a cinema in Paris or in Berlin or in the US, and not be able to actually access it here. So we wanted to just make sure that these films come to their rightful audiences, and not only because we are championing the idea of Arab cinema, but because it's an incredible language of cinema that is challenging challenging forms of even cinematic creation, introducing new forms of documentary filmmaking, that have contributed historically to a definition of cinema. If we're looking at Arab cinema classics and so on, so we wanted to make sure that that is present and represented through the kind of programming that we do. But ultimately, the thing that we have to remember, obviously, is that we are in a very diverse and rich and unique city, which is not exclusively Arab, it's not exclusively South Asian, it's not exclusively Eurocentric. It's a lot of different types of languages that we would have to represent on screen. And for us, it became very important to represent the community, that not only show films that are important as a cinema reference. So if you are a filmmaker that is looking to build a career as a filmmaker, you actually have a space that's showing important historical works and classic cinema and repertory cinema, and have access to that as part of your lived experience in the city, but also be able to present to a larger audience a cinema that represents the demographic richness, and the experiential richness and the cultural richness of the city. So that's become a central way of how we think about and how we challenge our programs.
Great. There were a couple of movies that were standing out at Cinema Akil, and like you wouldn't see them anywhere else, and some of them are now actually on Netflix. There was the series of the Saudi films that were by different directors like Mash'al Jasser, and it was there like 2 years ago, and now finally it's on Netflix, and it's amazing to see something that was screened on Cinema Akil to go somewhere. And there was also I remember screening a couple of Emirati films, and the last time I went, it was a Sudanese film. And it was interesting just to see all of the diversity of the kind of films that you would screen. Even it was during Christmas, there was a Home Alone, and you can see it at home, you can see it like on TV, but people wanted that feeling to be with other people, and it's like a cozy feeling for a movie that's just not out there in regular cinemas that you can see in Cinema Akil. So it's really different and special how the selection process you have for movies, and combined with the feeling that you get from just sitting there and watching a movie. Even if you want to go like before the movie is started and you want to work there, it's a very quiet place. And I would recommend everyone to just go watch a movie. If you haven't been to Cinema Akil, I would highly recommend to go and get the experience. Butheina, if you would like to tell people about currently if they want to attend with the whole COVID situation, is it open to the public?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned actually the Saudi program, because back in 2017, this is before the Saudi cinemas started to open. This is before the kind of the lightning speed with which a Saudi film industry started to to take a certain shape. And we wanted to, again, as part of this idea of presenting works that were coming out, to be a part, or at least a catalyst or a platform for these films to reach a different kind of audience, or even reach a particular sort of mode of presentation. And I think this is something that we're starting to notice now, is is this, it's been an ongoing debate, this idea of shifting to VOD, and and the death of cinemas, and that long-standing debate in the film industry that's still happening at the moment, and I think being accelerated because of the pandemic and the conditions of the pandemic. Ultimately, it still stood the test of time, that showing a film that had already screened online. These were films that that were made for they were made for YouTube. They were made by these incredible filmmakers from Saudi, uploaded onto YouTube, screened once in the US as part of a special program, and then uploaded onto YouTube. And the idea of presenting them on a big screen, and to a following that has been curious about about their work, about the filmmakers behind the work, behind the ideas, exchanging those ideas with them in person, was a very good example of of how we work with regional cinema, and that's what we continue to do. So even as we present films that have shown on other platforms, and this is something we'll continue to do, it's really about being able to not only come to the cinema, come together, but also engage with the creators of these works when they're available, to talk about the guiding kind of principles behind the work. Because that's what ultimately cinema is, right? It's it is a congregation around inspiration and magic. Yeah, this is just more of the space I want to show you. Yeah, these are some of the films that we've screened. Obviously, there are a lot more now, but you can see kind of we show classic films, and this is where we're going right now. I mean, we're kind of really having a sort of self-reflective period of celebration of cinema, what cinema means, and it's not just about our regular release. It has challenged everything about the way that we program, about what we stand for, and this is reflected in the way that we're thinking about the rest of the summer, and we're really kind of betting on films that will bring people and remind people, of the beauty of the big screen and the beauty of cinema. And those are the kinds of films, you may have seen them before. They're films that are, timeless, but, can only be really fully experienced through the magic of cinema. So this is kind of how and these are some of the things that we did as well in the space. I wanted to share those to just, again, this idea of, what else cinema can be. It's not really just about the screen, right? It's about having, for example, these musicians. This is one of our most magical moments, is these musicians that, came all the way from Pakistan, to perform live before the screening of a documentary called Indus Blues, sorry, about dying forms of music along the Indus Valley. We launched a series called Debatable, which was, looking at documentaries primarily that present challenging discussions and conversations. This image here is from the discussion around Leaving Neverland, the Michael Jackson documentary. Let me just and this is something we did during Ramadan, last Ramadan, where we transformed the cinema entirely into a majlis. needless to say, this feels like, this feels like centuries ago, where people are sitting in such close proximity, and, but ultimately it is the thing that will, take us forward. We are adapting to the current situation, and it took our time to really think about what we want to make sure is in place before we reopen. So we were one of the first cinemas to close before the lockdown, and we opened 2 weeks after the lifting of measures, because we really, ultimately wanted to make sure that the space was, ready and safe, for the community, because that's this idea of community, only really comes through not just as an idea, right? Everybody wants to reach and create community, but how you actually translate your commitment to that community, really has to manifest, spatially in a place like a cinema, where there is a big degree of trust, in the safety and the suitability of the place. So these are some of the things that we had to do and think about, and this is a collaboration with the Confused Arab, Sufyan Simrabit.
Cinema Akil is back. Now, to new safety measures that are ready to open safely again. Stay home if you feel unwell. Wash your hands consistently. Respect social distancing. Wear your mask. You can buy your tickets online only. The cinema seats will be disinfected with a fogging machine after every show.
Do you want some popcorn?
Yes.
Hi, can I have popcorn, please?
Where was I? Yes, your temperature will be taken at the El Cercal Avenue entrance. There are also several sanitizing stations across the cinema. And you will collect your food in a takeaway bag. The cinema will run at 30% capacity. And when the film is over, you will exit from the back door. And on that note, you can't be late to the screening, or you won't be allowed in.
Yeah, so I hope that answers your question. This is what you can expect to experience if you are to come these days. I'm not gonna, it is one of the, I'm not gonna sugarcoat, the sort of challenge of operating at a limited capacity, the challenge that we're all going through, but this is something that everybody, ultimately is experiencing, at different levels. And we are lucky to have a community that, that believes in cinema, even during these times, a community that bets on that their trust in each other as well to keep the place safe. So it's our part to make sure the place continues to operate at a safe in a safe environment. But also it comes down to to our audience, to our our supporters, to keep it safe, and to follow these measures, so we can continue to do the programming that we want to do, to continue to keep the space cozy and friendly. Cinema is going through an existential kind of crisis at the moment, with multiplexes and cinemas all over the world at different stages of reopening. And I think that community cinema can have the the unique position of persevering if these principles are upheld. In terms of programming, we're also thinking of very unique proposition, like I was saying, is the idea of bringing back films that you've always wanted to watch or wanted to watch again. And our best experience through the big screen. And we're collaborating with different cultural organizations to do a focus on travel, actually. So we're launching a program called Cinema Akil Traveler. We actually just announced this today in the press. So you're amongst the first to hear about it. We're starting the program, in lieu of actual travel and getting on a plane. I'm not sure if you're going to be doing that anytime soon. But yeah, we wanted to get people traveling through the big screen, essentially through this idea of focusing on really truly magical cinemas that transport you elsewhere, that transport you to a different time. So we're kicking off with a program called Journey to Italy, and we're showcasing 4 classic and cult feature films for longer extended releases. Starting with Federico Fellini's La Dolce Vita, or you know, it's a masterpiece. It's an absolute masterpiece from 1960. It won the Palme d'Or when it first came out. It's, you know, it will make you feel like, you know, you spent your summer holiday in Rome, you know, through the characters, and that's ultimately what cinema, you know, can do. That is, you know, different than you know, watching a film, you know, from your on Netflix or iTunes or Hulu or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, that's one way of watching it. And we also had our experience with VOD. You know, during the lockdown, we partnered with Movie to present a selection of films, you know, and did a few activations like that. But ultimately, what we are about is, you know, is this magic. So yeah, we're basically, you know, inviting everybody to travel with us, you know, through the summer. With these films, the full lineup is being announced today. But yeah, we have The Great Beauty, we have the Great Beauty, or La Grande Bellezza, which is a film by Paolo Sorrentino, also set in Rome, and then we have Il Postino, The Postman, and Mediterraneo. So these are films that really have this idea of, you know, of travel rooted at their core. And that's what you can expect. And La Dolce Vita opens on Friday, and it's the 60th anniversary of the film. So
Amazing.
I really hope everybody gets a chance to see it.
That's amazing. For our participants, if you have any questions, because I'm one question away from the Q&A section, you can just put your question and we're gonna look into that in about 5 minutes. So the last question, Butheina, is what advice can you give for aspiring young talents, especially women like you who would like to pursue a certain career or passion?
I mean, I don't believe in sweeping advice. I don't believe in the idea of, you know, of single source inspiration. I think that, you know, ultimately, you know, it is about believing something and, you know, and trying it out, and, you know, and gritting your teeth through the tough times, and believing in something that, you know, will have a lasting impact on the place that you choose to occupy in the world, you know, and to really, you know, try to pursue something that will give you that that's, you know, that sort of that drive or that satisfaction, or that that belief in something that's beyond yourself. You know, that's something that I fundamentally believe in, is not just to create something that gives you personal satisfaction. It's something that can really have a, you know, a larger impact in the world, in whichever, you know, area you choose to pursue, you know, whichever industry you choose to go into, or whichever project you choose to, you know, to endeavor. I think that always just having that question and having that very honest, you know, conversation with yourself is really important.
Great. Thank you so much, Butheina. This session was amazing. Everything was really amazing about it, the whole film and cinema, and whether if people want to, if our participants want to see more about it, you can check the Instagram for the calendar and see what movies there are, and the website as well. So I'm going to jump in and read some of the questions that we received. There's a question from Suleiman, and the question says, what are the challenges of for producing UAE films?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Oh, sorry. What are the challenges for producing UAE films?
For producing UAE films, I mean, where do I start? I think some of the challenges obviously are in funding, and the access to, you know, to funding bodies that invest in local productions. That's one of the challenges. The other challenge is access to a talent base. Other challenges include, you know, and not to say that I mean, there's a lot of talent based here as well, but you know, the sort of the lack of, I think, you know, full-fledged investment in the industry, has created a dearth in having access to a large pool of talent that you can work with. Part of it is, from a subject matter point of view, is I think a larger question about, what kind of stories you're supposed to tell or you're allowed to tell. I think there's a lot of self-censorship. There's a lot of, idealism in the way that we tell stories in the UAE. So that's on the sort of editorial side of the consideration. But yeah, I mean, funding is a very big part of it as well. So these two things together, I think, represent some of the challenges of filmmaking here in the UAE.
We'll take one more question because we're running out of time. There are a few people who asked the same question. Why is it called Cinema Akil?
That's a recurring question. We wanted to really give the cinema a personality, and really, it's a regional name. It is, it's a film. It's a name that has a cinematic quality to it. It comes from the roots of the Arabic word aql. Aqil is a common, not only Arab name. It's common to the larger, Minasa region, and comes from the word of, صاحب العقل or صاحب العقل والحكمة, or he or she who holds great wisdom and consciousness and mindfulness. And that's something that we wanted to kind of personify the idea of what the cinema represents. So it's a hypothetical kind of personification, really, of what represents a Cinema Akil goer.
Interesting. We have a few more questions, but because we're running out of time, I'm going to have to stop the session right here. We're going to let Butheina answer these questions offline, so you can see the answer later on. Butheina, thank you so much for attending this session. It was a pleasure having this session with you and seeing you again. I hoped that I would see you after the whole quarantine and the COVID situation ends. So thank you so much for attending this session.
Well, we're open, and I hope to see you at a distance. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Butheina. Thank you, Mariam. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you. Have a nice day.